Crossing a road with two lanes heading in the same direction can be tricky and dangerous, particularly if most other roads in the area have two lanes going in opposite directions. The safest way to cross such intersections is to be attentive. Be aware that all traffic travels in one direction, and be aware that vehicles on the lane closest to you can block your view of vehicles traveling on the lane furthest from you. On Monday, April 29, 2024, at about 6:40 p.m. in Tallahassee, Florida, a college student, Elizabeth M. Sims, also known as Ellie Sims, who was a sophomore at Florida State University, was killed while she tried to cross such a two-lane one-way road at an intersection near the FSU campus. There was no traffic light at the intersection, but there is a pole with a yellow flashing light that turns on when students or other pedestrians press a button showing they intend to cross. The flashing yellow light was on when the accident happened. The intersection is located between West Pensacola Street, the two-lane in one direction road Elizabeth was trying to cross, and Lorene Street, where Elizabeth had been walking in a northerly direction. The intersection, which I am familiar with, is rather dangerous, not only because of speeding vehicles, but also because often drivers who are unfamiliar with the road assume it is a two-way road, and it is not uncommon for vehicles to be traveling in the wrong direction. In this particular case, there is not a lot known about how the accident happened. What we know is that the yellow pedestrian light was flashing. We know that Elizabeth was crossing the road. We know that the driver who killed her was driving quite fast since her body was thrown more than 120 feet from the impact point. He also claims that the sun was impairing his vision, but he did not slow down as a result. Furthermore, the driver claims that there were other vehicles ahead of his, and those vehicles may have impaired Elizabeth's view of the fast approaching car that killed her. It is not unusual for pedestrians to hit the button that turns on the yellow flashing light and then start to cross, with the pedestrian assuming that oncoming traffic will slow down and/or stop for the pedestrian. We do not know what happened here. Was this a situation where Elizabeth pressed the button, the vehicles in the right lane closest to her slowed down to let her cross? She feels safe to start to cross, but then a fast-traveling vehicle in the outside left lane rushes towards her and she had no time to react? This seems like a possible scenario. We will continue to monitor the case to determine what was the exact cause of the accident. Sadly, Elizabeth had no chance against the fast-approaching Nissan Sentra. One hopes that her loss will cause other pedestrians to be extra cautious at intersections and to not overly rely on the yellow flashing light, which I think gives pedestrians a false sense of security. There are too many people out there who simply don't care about the consequences of their actions. They operate vehicles while distracted, they drive while intoxicated. A pedestrian does not have much of a chance against a fast approaching vehicle. Better to be safe than sorry should be the motto. Now let's talk about the young man who killed Elizabeth. The young man left the scene and did not stop to render aid to Elizabeth. He just took off and went to a friend's house. The name of the 18-year-old is Willis Lamar Trueblood Jr. He's not to be confused with Willis Lamar Trueblood, his father, who has a long rap sheet including a couple stints in Florida prison, one for battery on a pregnant woman and another one for shooting into a building. The defendant in this case is Junior, the son. The 18-year-old was driving a 2008 Nissan Sentra. Thanks to the police cameras all over the campus and the city, law enforcement was able to identify the vehicle and track it down to the friend's house. About 4 hours after he killed Elizabeth, Mr. Trueblood was interviewed and arrested for leaving the scene of an accident that resulted in someone's death. During the recorded interrogation that night, Mr. Trueblood Jr. in essence admitted to the fact that he was driving the vehicle, which, by the way, the cops saw and it had damage to it that was consistent with what happened. But he claimed that he was semi-blindsided by the sun as he drove west on West Pensacola Street. He did admit to knowing that he hit a pedestrian, whom he claimed ran into his vehicle. He stated that he left the scene because he panicked. He admitted that he messed up. The rumor is that he was traveling fast, possibly as fast as 70 miles per hour, something that is consistent with the distance Elizabeth's body traveled following the impact. Regardless of who was at fault, however, leaving the scene of an accident in which someone is injured or killed is a serious crime in Florida. Mr. Trueblood was supposed to stop at the scene or nearby, render aid to others involved in the accident, and provide his contact information. Because of the result of the accident, the fact that Elizabeth died and that Mr. Trueblood left the scene of the accident, he now faces a first-degree felony that is punishable for up to 30 years in prison. There's a minimum mandatory sentence of 4 years in prison. Again, it really doesn't matter whether or not Trueblood Jr. was at fault for the accident, or whether Elizabeth was at fault for the accident, or even if both had some fault in the accident. The statute is in place to make sure that people involved in a serious accident stay behind, first to render aid to anyone injured, including calling for help, and second to provide their information to those involved in the accident and/or the police. Stopping to render aid is the most important requirement. Of course, especially because the driver may be the only one to know that someone was injured. In cases of serious injury, timing, how fast emergency services take to make it to the scene, can mean the difference between life and death. A driver who stops and immediately calls 911 can literally help save the person who was injured in the accident. Of course, it is more likely that a person who knew they were in the wrong, like someone speeding through a college neighborhood or someone intoxicated and driving, that type of person is more likely to leave the scene. They hope that they will never be identified, will never have to face any consequences for their irresponsible actions. That is why the law is so harsh on those leaving the scene of an accident. Here, Trueblood left the scene of the accident that involved death, and that makes it a first-degree felony in Florida, which is punishable by up to 30 years in prison with a minimum mandatory of 4 years in prison. Of course, unfortunately, there are so many sad incidences in colleges and universities across the country involving the deaths of pedestrians. It is almost an epidemic. I've covered several cases. I remember one that occurred maybe a year or two ago of another beautiful young lady who was killed near the university by a drunk driver or a suspected drunk driver. But for the college students out there, number one is you've got to do everything you can to watch out for your own safety. One of the concerning things to me about those posts and lights is that when somebody is crossing the intersection, there will be a flashing yellow light to give a warning to approaching drivers to slow down and watch out for pedestrian traffic or to stop for pedestrian traffic. I just want to say you should not rely on that to protect you. It is there to hopefully encourage drivers to be more responsible and watch out for the safety of pedestrians. But if you're a pedestrian, you've got to watch out for yourself. You don't want to be in a situation where you're dead or severely injured and now somebody has to fight for justice for you. I don't want to blame the victim, and we do not know the details of the accident, but we want to avoid as many accidents as can be avoided. So just gotta watch out. You can't trust the people on the road. Too many distracted drivers, too many irresponsible people who just don't care about the possible consequences of their conduct while operating a vehicle. This is a young man who was only 18 when he was driving the car, probably not very experienced. Unfortunately, this young woman is dead. Her family is in deep pain, suffering from, of course, the loss of a sister, a daughter. It's just horrible. I have a daughter myself and always worry about my boys and my girl. It is so dangerous out there, especially with all of the distracted driving these days. Anyway, I will continue to monitor this case and keep you guys updated. Please stay safe. And if you're the family of Elizabeth Ellie Sims and you want to talk to me or you want to talk on the show and try to promote safety, maybe advocate for a light to be placed in that spot or anything you want to do, feel free to contact me here on the channel. My condolences to the family and friends of Elizabeth Ellie Sims. Of course, that is a huge loss and I feel your pain. As for Mr. Trueblood Jr., he's entitled to have a defense. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Everything that was stated in this video is the state's theory of the case and their description of the statements of Mr. Trueblood. But he hasn't been convicted yet, so he's entitled to a defense and we'll see what happens. For other young drivers out there, be safe, drive safely, be considerate of others. In this particular case, if it is true that Mr. Trueblood couldn't see very well because of the sun, the right thing to do was to slow down, to be extra careful, not to speed through roads in a college area, knowing there's a lot of foot traffic around and that you could hurt someone, kill someone, and then take off. Stopping after an accident is the law, and if you don't stop and you get caught, then you face severe consequences, especially if someone is hurt severely or dies. And in the case of death, of course, the punishment is a lot worse. Unfortunately, the probable cause affidavit doesn't indicate anything about where Trueblood was coming from, where he was going, or where Elizabeth was coming from and going to, a lot of details that we simply don't know at this time. You should know that coming soon to this channel will be a full DUI trial of a guy here in Tallahassee who has had several DUIs and who got involved in a head-on collision while operating a vehicle, allegedly drunk. But this is a trial that happened a few months before this collision that I am talking about, where he was charged with a DUI for another accident, a single car accident that he was involved in, and the case went to trial. And you'll see the result. Anyway, that's coming up soon. Thanks for watching Mentor Lawyer.